Beach FM Saturday Sports Breakfast.
Welcome back to Beach FM Sport with Damian, and we're going to change it up now, and we're going to talk something we've never talked about on Beach FM, and we're going to talk esports, and it is a great pleasure to welcome into the show one of the founding members from New Zealand Esports Federation, Duane Mutu. G'day, mate.
G'day, mate. Good morning, and thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I sent you guys an email actually a couple of weeks ago, but no, I thought I'd find your number, and I left you a message, so thank you very much for calling me back. Hey, mate, crazy.
It's a busy time, so it wasn't you, mate, just to be clear. It's a busy time in Eastport land, so I'm glad that we could connect.
I can imagine. You know, a lot of people find themselves in very tricky times, but, you know, you probably find yourself busier more than ever. Can you just tell us a little bit of background about the New Zealand Esports Federation and a bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been busy time. So my background has really been in, I worked in gaming for a lot of years at a commercial level with a lot of the big brands across the globe that people might know, it's Activision, Ubisoft, right through to Warner, Disney, PlayStation, etc. And then I migrated into working with the media of gaming, and that's, what really we're seeing now across, and many of your listeners will understand this if you've got kids, watching YouTube, streamers participating right through to the competition. So that's why I kind of moved across into. So my corporate background has been heavily engaged in the space of video gaming. And then also we founded the New Zealand Esports Federation going back 4 years now. And that federation, we spoke to the government about where we would fit in the landscape. And people must try to remember back 4 years ago where really no one had even really heard of esports, right? There wasn't even a terminology in mainstream kind of culture. And so we were tasked with where we were put, and then we got put into the sporting organisation realm. And so we went about sort of fulfilling the obligations of that. And then going back about a month ago now, New Zealand Sport recognised esports as a sport by officially accrediting the New Zealand Esports Federation as a national sporting organisation. So for your listeners, primarily that now means that we sit next to the other 35 or 40 federations, which will include your big hitters like New Zealand Rugby, New Zealand Basketball, Cricket, to name a few. So we are now one of those organisations. So it's a not-for-profit that represents the overarching considerations of esports in this country.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because it was definitely a question of mine because it wasn't long ago that it was announced. What does that actually mean to you guys as a federation with, funding, with tournaments, with how your projection going forward?
Yeah, it's a really great point, and people have asked us. So what people have to kind of understand is, we've done this out of our own pocket, out of love, out of, wanting to see it through. And so there hasn't been money for us for 4 years. And so all the lobbying, all the effort has come from all those board members in varying ways, whether it be speaking in media or, Ben, who is our president, is a lawyer, so he's done a lot of that work off his own bat. And so now we have the funding. We basically, by being an NSO, we don't get it overnight, and it'll be a slow trickle. What that looks like, we're not sure, but certainly, there's the ability for us to look at high performance funding. But certainly, New Zealand sport at this moment is obviously other sports to consider, and we're not really looking to go there. But that would open up that. It would open up the ability for us to look to Sport New Zealand about how we can kind of grow it. But then it also opens up all your other traditional funding opportunities, whether it be trust funding. We can obviously go out and open up everything else that any other sport can get from a revenue perspective. We now have the ability to do that by being accredited. So that will get money within the federation. And then it's our job to kind of look after what we see as the pillars of trying to help grow esports in the country. And some of those will include infrastructure. I mean, what does infrastructure look like into the future? If you think about basketball and rugby fields, they're everywhere. Everyone wants more facilities. At the moment, we have no facilities apart from kind of commercial-driven or owned facilities. So what does that look like? What does it look like for education? Right now, if you think about schools, normal sports groups go into schools and talk about how you play basketball, what good practices are for rugby, tackling, clinics, etc. We now have the ability to be able to kind of champion that and kind of have some funding to go towards education. I think that's a really big one for parents listening, if they're listening today, going, shit, man, I just think my child is actually, playing too much Fortnite. Well, actually, what if we kind of help educate that actually there's pathways, these are good things, and this can lead into careers. So there's those sorts of parts we need to look at. And then, of course, we need to help the core community groups that have already been established, that are working, whether it be teams, good organizations. What does it mean to help them grow their organizations and their user base in a meaningful way that we can help? And that's really what the NZSF will be able to do now that we're an NSO and hopefully get some funding in time.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm glad you. So you're funding for things going forward. If people aren't aware, in America, this is massive. Like when you talk about your infrastructure and where it would place, it isn't. We're not just talking about a desk at home with a microphone and a headset and the gaming console. We're talking about stadiums with arenas with big screen TVs and everybody in their own pods and it's a very big spectacle that is pretty in order to watch.
It is, and I think this is a big thing, is people need to understand how big this is and why it's important to, I guess, the new generation moving forward, is just how large this is. So right now, with the Credible International Group that most people look to for stats, 494 million esports audience numbers, right? That's the number of people who believe in both casual and right through the spectrum. Almost 500 million, right? So that's huge. Within 3 years, pre-COVID, that was meant to be around 650 million. And that trajectory has been the way for the last 5 years. It is jumping in the hundreds of millions, right? So we are just seeing people absolutely jump into esports. So if you think about it in 3 years, and with COVID, it might be faster, 650 million. That's how many people. If we look at the revenue going through the roof, 1.1 billion at the moment, heading up to 1.6. And that's only a fraction if we think about sports, generally speaking. So it's going to explode there. And then more to your point around specifically some of the, I guess, individual tournaments or individual games that have big tournaments. Let's look at League of Legends, a particular game, the largest game on earth. There is 100 million people tune in to watch the championship or the best two teams compete. 100 million.
Whoa.
If we put that on comparison with people that may know traditional sport, it's bigger just than the Super Bowl, or at least on par with the Super Bowl, which is the largest spectacle on earth for sporting as far as viewership. So we're talking about something that's already apples to apples. When we look at prize money, we look at something like Fortnite, which people will be familiar with. They came out and offered 100 million through their tournament play, and one singular tournament, which is the Fortnite World Cup, $30 million. That's equivalent and more than what you would earn at Wimbledon to play, with the winner earning, which is a player called Buga, earning 4.3 million. He was 16 years of age. That's more than what Djokovic won at Wimbledon. So when you start to look at comparisons, apples to apples in sporting terms,
wow,
this thing is absolutely a behemoth, and it's only growing. So, and that is why it's important, I think, for your listeners and people to understand, the trajectory that esports is on.
And it's people aren't just gamers out there in this community, are there? They're watchers, they're promoters, there's advertising revenue. Like, how big is the community in New Zealand?
Yep, great question. So we've seen that grow going back 5 years when we sort of jumped into it. The numbers looked at about 600 to 700,000, which is still a large number if you take that with New Zealand Rugby right at the moment.
Wow, yeah.
They were about 115,000, was their player base, male to female. That's New Zealand Rugby's number. Of course, basketball's growing. So if we take that, just so everyone has a snapshot, then we look at, like you said, going back even 5 years, we had 700,000 sort of people who were engaged in video games as a pastime, right? That was, and esports, the terminology for esports is that you have played a competitive video game match. That's the definition. So it's not just you at home playing by yourself doing Sudoku online. It's actually, I'm going to take you on right now at a game, and that would be classified. Today, we're looking at 1.03 million Kiwis who are esports participants in some shape or form. So we're over 1 million already, close to getting close to 5 million. So we can say that 20% of the population are engaged. And so when we see the decline of sport, we know that that's already happening as far as we're growing, general sports are declining. So that's probably the starting point. And then I want to really point out, as you mentioned, yes, there's a complete ecosystem here. We've got players, and those players are playing for professional teams now, and professional by the nature that they're getting paid to play. Two examples that people might know the brands of are the Breakers, as in the basketball team. They have an esports professional bunch of teams, and also the Warriors, as in the NRR team, also have teams that are paid for to play video games for them under the Warriors mantra. And then, of course, there's your endemic brands that are there. So we have this professional level. We have broadcasters like Let's Play Live who will put this content onto TV, onto Twitch, onto YouTube, and then you've got all the advertising and then audience that sit around it. So you've got players right through to people who just enjoy watching. A great stat I saw the other day was from, which people, your audience base will understand, is NASCAR. They had 1.3 million viewers on NASCAR. We saw close to 158,000 watching the virtual version of Supercars as well, with Scotty McLaughlin. So those are the numbers that you're seeing and how this big ecosystem works. But there's, some meaningful numbers and viewers right through to the players.
I'm glad you brought up the supercars because what are your thoughts on the sports that are out there at the moment to during this time that have embraced the esports, the way about it, the basketball, they're including 2K just because they want to still be involved in the game and stuff. So your thoughts on sport actually including this the electronic side during this time?
Yeah, I think that's a really, this is really heightened what was already starting to happen. Yeah. I think what we're seeing, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news for people out there, but we do know, and remembering that this is coming from a place where I play traditional sport myself, played at a high level, I coach my kids. We have to understand that sport has its own natural challenges, right, in this new world. Before we even talk about esports, and their challenges are the fact that there was already a declining player base. There was already a decline in viewership where people want to watch it. There was a decline, therefore, in people attending, the stadiums and therefore paying for merchandise, etc. Not across all sports. There are some great examples like NBA, but certainly as a general sweeping, that is a true definition of what's happening with sport. So a lot of those sports are looking to diversify because what they realized is that esports presented an opportunity for them to talk to 18 to 34-year-old young males who they weren't able to engage with because most sports, when you look at the stats that I've seen, is 40 plus, right? And I think that's a fair assessment of where we've traditionally been for watching sports. So sports groups are jumping in. COVID-19 has just accelerated that kind of need to get in there. And so like you said, is if you think about video games, some of the easy crossover stuff was kind of like a gimme, right? We saw supercars, we've seen NASCAR, all those motor racing sims that are really close to the real thing. And the drivers are used to practicing on those sims. They've just jumped into it. And it's a really easy understanding kind of model for a motor racing fan who kind of knows Scotty McLaughlin, he knows supercars or she knows supercars, and they know the track that they're racing. So it's kind of really easy to watch, and the graphics are amazing, so it's easy to do it. And then you've seen this crossover of games like 2K and FIFA where, again, people know what they're looking at, and if you add in the superstars like Kevin Durant playing one-on-one against another superstar like Devin Booker who won that tournament, really easy crossover for that basketball audience to understand that because it's their superstar playing a game they know. So that's really good. What's really interesting to me, though, is actually some of the sports groups really looking to engage into games that would actually not be meaningful in a straight crossover. And I'll give you an example. Is the Adelaide Crows. AFL is a huge game in Australia, certainly, and actually probably the largest of the sport bodies. Adelaide Crows are one of the strongest teams within that league, and they didn't just jump into an AFL game because there wasn't really one available. They went and jumped into League of Legends. And so it's why would they jump into that? They jumped into it because they wanted to get that really big audience. So that's some examples. But do I think it's great? Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's only going to grow. So people should look to embrace it because even in my conversations, which I can't openly mention, but certainly I've engaged with a lot of the top sporting organisations in New Zealand, and they're all looking to get into esports in some shape or form.
Wow. Outstanding. Well, mate, I'm going to always be forever grateful for NBA 2K because when I became a basketball announcer, I just smashed it for about a month and learnt pretty much every basketball rule there was. So the educational as well. Hey, mate, I've taken up so much of your time. Lastly, what's next for you guys and how do people find you to get more information?
Yes, great. Yeah, I think the next thing for us is really trying to help anyone out there that really is either interested or trying to learn or new to esports, right through to delivering them the opportunity to head across. If you're already a really good player and you really want to kind of know what the good organizations are or how you kind of evolve, then you just need to head across to our website, the New Zealand Esports Federation, and there'll be a lot of information there. So that's sort of what we're up to, and hopefully we can, share a good light out there. And again, really appreciate as well the opportunity to chat on your show for all your listeners. Hopefully they got something insightful from the conversation today.
Well, I most definitely did, mate. So thank you so much for your time this morning. Go well during this time, and only bigger things to come for you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone listening.